Lecture 7, a literary analysis essay. The purpose of a literary analysis essay is to carefully examine and sometimes evaluate a work of literature or as aspect of a work of literature. As with any analysis, this requires you to break the subject down into its component parts. Examining the different elements of a piece of literature is not an end in itself, but rather a process to help you better appreciate and understand the work of literature as a whole. For instance, an analysis of a poem might deal with the different types of images in a poem or with the relationship between the form and content of the work. If you were to analyze, discuss, and explain a play, you might analyze the relationship between a subplot and the main plot, or you might analyze the character flaw of the tragic hero by tracing how it is revealed through the acts of the play. Analyzing a short story might include identifying a particular theme, like the difficulty of making the transition from adolescence to adulthood, and showing how the writer suggests that theme through the point of view from which the story is told. Or you might also explain how the main character's attitude towards women is revealed through his dialects or actions. Remember, writing is a sharpened, focused expression of thought and study. As you develop your writing skills, you will also improve your perceptions and increase your critical abilities. Writing ultimately boils down to the development of an idea. Your objective in writing a literary analysis essay is to convince the person reading your essay that you have supported the idea you are developing. Unlike ordinary conversation and classroom discussion, writing must stick with great determination to the specific point of development. This kind of writing demands tight organization and control. Therefore, your essay must have a central idea, thesis. It must have several paragraphs that grow systematically out of the central idea, and everything in it must be directly related to the central idea and must contribute to the reader's understanding of that central idea. These three principles are listed here. A literary essay must cover the topic you're writing about. A literary essay must have a central idea stated in your thesis that governs its development, and a literary analysis must be organized so that every part contributes something to the reader's understanding of the central idea. The elements of a solid essay. The thesis statement tells your reader what to expect. It is a restricted, precisely worded declarative sentence that states the purpose of your essay, the point you are trying to make. Without a carefully conceived thesis, an essay has no chance of success. The following are thesis statements which would work for 500, 750 word literary analysis essay. The fate of the main character in Antioch illustrates the danger of excessive pride. The imagery of Dylan Thomas's poem Fernhill reveals the ambiguity of humans' relationship with nature. Typically, the thesis statement falls at the end of your introductory paragraph. The introduction to your literary analysis essay should try to capture your reader's interest. To bring immediate focus to your subject, you may want to use a quotation, a provocative question, a brief anecdote, a startling statement, or a combination of these. You may also want to include background information relevant to your thesis and necessary for the reader to understand the position you are taking. In addition, you need to include the title of the work of literature and the name of the author. The following are satisfactory introductory paragraphs which include appropriate thesis statements. The first paragraph of Alberto Alvaro Rayo's short story, The Secret Lion, presents a 12-year-old boy's view of growing up. Everything changes. As the narrator informs the reader, when the magician pulls a tablecloth out from under a pile of dishes, children are amazed at the stay the same part, while adults focus only on the tablecloth itself. Adults have the benefit of experience and know the trick will work as long as the technique is correct. When people grow up, they gain this experience and knowledge, but lose their innocence and sense of wonder. In other words, the price paid for growing up is a permanent sense of loss. This trade-off is central to The Secret Lion. The key symbols in the story reinforce its main theme. Change is inevitable and always accompanied by a sense of loss. Example B. The setting of John Updike's story A and P is crucial to the reader's understanding of Sammy's decision to quit his job. Even though Sammy knows that his quitting will make life more difficult for him, he instinctively insists upon rejecting what the A and P represents in the story. When he rings up a no sale and saunters out of the store, Sammy leaves behind not only a job, but the rigid state of mind associated with the A and P. Although Sammy is the central character in the story, Updike seems to invest as much effort in describing the setting of as he does Sammy. The title, after all, is not Youthful Rebellion or Sammy Quits, but A and P. The setting is the antagonist of the story and plays a role that is as important as Sammy's. Example C. What would one expect to be the personality of a man who has his wife sent away to a convent or perhaps has had her murdered because she took too much pleasure in the sunset and in compliment paid to her by another man? It is just such a man, a Renaissance Duke, who Robert Browning portrays in his poem My Last Duchess. A character analysis of the Duke reveals that through his internal dialogue, his interpretation of earlier incidents and his actions, his traits, arrogance, jealousy, and greediness emerge. The body of the essay and the importance of topic sentences. The term regularly used for the development of the central idea of a literary analysis essay is the body. In this section, you present the paragraph, at least 3 paragraphs for a 500-750 word essay that support your thesis statement. Good literary analysis essays contain an explanation of your ideas and evidence from the text, short story, poem, play that supports those ideas. Textual evidence consists of summary, paraphrase, specific details, and direction quotations. Each paragraph should contain a topic sentence, usually the first sentence of the paragraph, which states one of the topics associated with your thesis, combined with some assertion about how the topic will support the central idea. The purpose of the topic sentence is twofold: to relate the details of the paragraph to your thesis statement, and to tie the details of the paragraph together. The substance of each of your developmental paragraphs, the body of your essay, will be the explanations, summaries, paraphrases, specific details, and direct quotations you need to support and develop the more general statement you have made in your topic sentence. The following is the first development paragraph after one of the introductory paragraphs given. So, the topic sentence. Sammy's descriptions of the A and P present a setting that is ugly, monotonous, and rigidly regulated. The chain store is a common fixture in modern society, so the reader can identify with the uniformity Sami describes. And explanations and textual evidence, the fluorescent light is an blandly cool at the checkerboard green and cream rubber tile floor. The usual traffic in the store moves in one direction, except for the swim-suited girls who moved against it, and everything in neatly organized and categorized in tidy aisles. The dehumanizing routine of this environment is suggested by Sami's offhand references to the typical shoppers as sheep, house slaves, and pigs. These regular customers seem to walk through the store in a stupor, as Sami indicates. Not even dynamite could move them out of their routine. This paragraph is a strong one because it is developed through the use of quotations, summary, details, and explanation to support the topic sentence. Notice how it relates back to the thesis statement. The conclusion. Your literary analysis essay should have a concluding paragraph that gives your essay a sense of completeness and lets your readers know that they have come to the end of your paper. Your concluding paragraph might restate the thesis in different words, summarize the main points you have made, or make a relevant comment about the literary work you are analyzing, but from a different perspective. Do not introduce a new topic in your conclusion. Below is the concluding paragraph from the essay already quoted about Browning's poem My Last Duchess. If the Duke has any redeeming qualities, they fail to appear in the poem. Browning's emphasis on the Duke's traits of arrogance, jealousy, and materialism make it apparent that everyone who might have known the Duke personally would have based his opinion on him on these three personality flaws. Ultimately, the reader's opinion of the Duke is not a favorable one, and it is clearly that Browning intended that the reader feel this way. The title of your essay. It is essential that you give your essay a title that is descriptive of the approach you are taking in your paper. Just as you did in your introductory paragraph, try to get the reader's attention. Using only the title of the literary work you are examining is unsatisfactory. The titles that follow are appropriate for the papers discussed above. The A&P as a state of mind, theme in the secret line, the struggle of adolescence, Robert Browning's Duke, a portrayal of a sinister man. Audience. Consider the reader for whom you are writing your essay. Imagine you are writing for not only your professor but also other students in your class who have about as much education as you do. They have read the assigned work just as you have, but perhaps they have not thought about it in exactly the same way. In other words, it is not necessarily to retell the work of literature in any way. Rather, it is your role to be the explainer or interpreter of the book, to tell what certain elements of the book mean in relation to your central idea, thesis. When you make references to the text of the short story, poem, or play, you are doing so to remind your audience of something they already know. The principal emphasis of your essay is to draw conclusions and develop arguments. Be sure to avoid plot summary. Using textual evidence. The skillful use of textual evidence, summary, paraphrase, specific detail, and direct quotations can illustrate the ideas you are developing in your essay. However, textual evidence should be used judiciously and only when it directly relates to your topic. The correct and effective use of textual evidence is vital to the successful literary analysis essay. Summary. If a key event or series of events in the literary work support a point you are trying to make, you may want to include a brief summary. making sure that you show the relevance of the event or events by explicitly connecting your summary to the point. Below is the effective summary with its relevance clearly pointed out from the essay quoted above on the secret line. The boys find the grinding ball, but later attempt to bury it. Summary. Burying it is their futile attempt to make time stand still and to preserve perfection. Relevance. Paraphrase. You can make use of paraphrase when you need the details of the original, but not necessarily the words of the original. Paraphrase to put someone else's words into your own words. Below is the example, also from the paper on the secret line, of how to translate original material into part of your own paper. Original. I was 12 and in junior high school, and something happened that we didn't have a name for it, but it was nonetheless like a lion and roaring, that way the bigger things do. Paraphrase. Early in the story, the narrator tells us that when he turned 12 years old and started junior high school, life changed in a significant way that he and his friends could not quite name or identify. Specific detail. Various types of details from the text lend concrete support to the development of the central idea of your literary analysis essay. These details add credibility to the point you are developing. Below is a list of some of the details which could have been used in the developmental paragraph from the paper of the John Updike's short story A and P. See the paragraph again for which details were used and how they were used. The details, specific details: usual traffic, fluorescent lights, checkerboard green and cream rubber tile floor, electric eye, shoppers like sheep, house slaves and pigs, neatly stacked food, dynamite. Using direct quotations. Quotation can illuminate and support the ideas you are trying to develop. A judicial use of quoted material will make your points clearer and more convincing. As with all the textual evidence you use, make sure you explain how the evidence is relevant. Let the reader know why the quotes you cite are significant to your argument. Below are the guidelines and examples that should help you effectively use quotations. Brief quotations. Four lines or fewer of prose and 3 lines or fewer of poetry should be carefully introduced and integrated into the text of your paper. Put quotation marks around all briefly quoted material. For example, as the manager of the A&P, Lendl is both the guardian and enforcer of the policy. When he gives the girls that sad Sunday school superintendent stare, the reader becomes aware of the Lendl's character and the A&P's version of a dreary bureaucrat who doesn't miss much. Make sure you give page numbers when necessary. Notice that in this example the page numbers are in parentheses after the quotation marks but before the period. Poetry example. From the beginning, the Duke in Browning's poem gives the reader a sense of how possessive he really is. That's my last Duchess on the wall, looking as if she were alive. The reader cannot help but notice how, even though the Duke is talking about her portrait, his main concern is that he belongs to him. Notice that line number 1 is separated from line number 2 by a slash. Make sure you give the line numbers when necessary. Lengthy quotations should be separated from the text of your paper. More than 4 lines of prose should be double-spaced and intended 10 spaces from the left margin, with the right margin the same as the rest of your paper. More than 3 lines of poetry should be double-spaced and centered on the page. Note: do not use quotation marks to set off these longer passages, because the indentation itself indicates that the material is quoted. A prose example. The first paragraph of Secret Line introduces the narrator as someone who has just entered adolescence and is uncertain what to make of it. I was 12 and in junior high school, and something happened that we didn't have a name for, but it was there nonetheless, like a lion, the roaring that way the biggest things do. Everything changed. Just that, like the rug, the one that gets pulled, or better, like the tablecloth, those magicians pull where the staff of the table stays the same, but the grasp from the audience make the staying the same part not matter. Like that. Make sure you give page numbers when necessary. Notice in this example that the page numbers are in parentheses after the period of the last sentence. Poetry example. The Duke seems to object to the fact that his last Duchess is not discriminating enough about bestowing her affection. In the following lines, the Duke lists examples of this fault. So, 'twas all one, my favour of her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries, some officious fool, broke in the orchard for her, the white mule, she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. Browning, 2550. Be sure to provide the line numbers. If any words are added to the quotation in order to explain who or what the quotation refers to, you must use brackets to distinguish your addition from the original source. For example, the literary critic John Strauss asserts that he, young Goodman Brown, is portrayed as self-righteous and disillusioned. Brackets are used here because there is no way of knowing who he is unless you add that information. Brackets are also used to change the grammatical structure of a quotation so that it fits into your sentence. Strauss also argues that Hawthorne presents young Goodman Brown in an ambivalent light. Brackets are used here to add the s to the verb presents, because otherwise the sentence would be not grammatically correct. You must use ellipses if you omit any words from the original source you are quoting. Ellipses can be used at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the quotation, depending on where the missing words were originally. Ellipsis is formed by either 3 or 4 periods, with a space between each period. Original. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Example of omission from the beginning. This behavior makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Ellipse is formed by 3 dots after the quotation marks. Use a single line of spaced periods to indicate the omission of an entire line of poetry. For example, the Duke seems to object to the fact that his last Duchess is not discriminating enough about bestowing her affection. She looked on, and her looks went everywhere. The dropping of the daylight in the west, the bower of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, while the white mule she rode around the terrace, like and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. Punctuating direct quotations. You will be able to punctuate quoted materials accurately if you observe the following conventions used in writing about literature. First, when the quoted material is part of your own sentence, place periods and commas inside the quotation mark. For example, according to the narrator of The Secret Lion, change was like a lion, meaning that its onset is sudden and ferocious. The comma is inside the quotation marks. Second, when the quoted material is part of your own sentence, but you need to include a parenthetical reference to page or line number, place the periods and commas after the reference. For example, the narrator of The Secret Lion says that the change was like lion. Rise 41. The period is outside the quotation mark after the parenthetical reference. 3. When the quoted material is part of your own sentence, punctuation marks other than periods and commas, such as question marks, are placed outside the quotation marks unless they are part of the quoted material. For example, not part of original. Why does the narrator of The Secret Lion say that the changes was like a lion? The question mark is placed after the quotation mark because it does not appear in the original. It ends a question being asked about the story. Example part of original. The Duke shows his indignation that the Duchess could like everyone and everything when he says, "Sir, 'twas all one." The exclamation point is placed inside the quotation mark because it appears in the original. Four. When the original material you are quoting already has quotation marks, for instance, dialogue from a short story, you must use single quotation marks within the double quotation marks. For example, when Jill tries to stop Sammy from quitting by saying, "Sammy, you don't want to do this to your mom and dad." Updike 486.